We're back with you. The newsfeed late night continues now. Today marks 100 years since over 200 church members of the Church of God were gunned down by police in Ntabelanga after refusing to vacate a piece of land they regarded as sacred, a place of worship. The church members, known as the Israelites, were accused of illegally occupying government land and not paying taxes in what has become known as the Bulhoek massacre. Joining me now to talk about this is Eastern Cape MEC for Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, Fezeka Nkomonye. MEC, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night. Talk to us about the impact and the significance of the Bulhoek massacre.
Good evening to you, Thabo, and to your listeners, your viewers at home. Thank you for having me. The significance of commemorating the centennial celebration of Bulhoek massacre today is that we get an opportunity to write our own story, to tell the history, not using the lens of those who oppressed us, but telling our own story as the people of this province and as the people of South Africa. It's also significant, Thabo, that we tell this story when we mark 100 years, because this province is the only mostly fortified province in the country, but also of the 10 frontier wars that were fought in South Africa during the liberation time, and 9 of those were fought in the province of the Eastern Cape. So today we marked the significance of the contribution of the church into the liberation of this country.
Now, this struggle was by and large pretty much linked to the fight for land, which I suppose quite significant in today's context, as that struggle still has not been won.
That's true. At the heart of what was fought about, the clash was basically about a land wherein the Church of God and the Saints of Christ was worshipping. The whites at the time claimed that that piece of land belonged to them and they ought to pay taxes. However, history records that that land was given by the clan of Amatlubi to the prophet Enoch Mgijima together with his congregants. So in essence, the fight was really about the land.
Now, there are 2 schools of thoughts, as you mentioned, and you wanted to clarify this. And others are saying the religious movement went wrong. Others are saying that, of course, this was not just about going wrong, but it was a resistance similar to, I suppose, some of the resistance that we are seeing today. So what was the part of history that you wanted to set straight here?
The part of history that we wanted to set straight is that if you look at the history records, the books that are taught at school, even if you Google, you'll find that what is being told is that the congregants were at the wrong, because the history is told by those who oppressed us. So they are narrating that the congregants were violent, the congregants were occupying a land that did not belong to them. But what we found in what was narrated today, and which for us is the true history of what happened, is that more than 200 people were killed, more than 190 were wounded, and more than 80 were sentenced to over 6 years, because they went, and at this period, this is a period just after the Easter of the Church of God and the Saints of Christ. So they went to Ntabelanga to honor their Passover. So they went there to worship in a land that belonged to them, that was rightfully given to them. So they did not leave, they did not vacate the place, because as a visionary leader, Prophet Enoch Mgijima received a prophecy that they should not move at the end of the Passover. So they occupied the land beyond the Passover. That's when the whites came in and forcefully removed them. So the history is told in 2 sets, and it depends at which lens are you looking at. And we want, as the province of the Eastern Cape, to tell a history in our own way and using our own lens.
Now, it's recorded that this massacre was the culmination of 2 years of negotiations between Mgijima and the authorities, first local and then national. Was this tragedy avoidable?
It depends, Tabo, how you look at it. All massacres, with hindsight, one can recall that all massacres, there are elements to them that can be avoidable. It's unfortunate that the tussle at that time was the issue of the land, and I don't think for those who participated in this worship, they did not think that it would end up with a loss of lives. Maybe there could have been a way that the massacre could have been avoided. Maybe there could have been a way that a negotiation could have taken longer so that a settlement was reached. I want to believe that it could have been avoided. But at the time, you must remember that the whites did not understand the negotiations. For them, force was the order of the day, and the police of that time only understood force. So it could have been avoided only if the police at the time were not as militarized as they were.
Yeah. So, I mean, towards the end, what actually happened is that the force, as you put it, tried to persuade the Israelites to leave the area by offering them food and some free train tickets. But their response, of course, was complete defiance. What actually happened that led to the turning point where now the police then decided to release fire?
True to the nature of the people of this province, we at the time were given a lot of things as part of exchange so that we can leave the land or give over our cattle and our livestock. So the resistance is indicative of the resistance that the people of this province had towards the white supremacy. So that's why they did not leave, because they understood that their culture, their right to worship in the land that they thought, in the land that they believed was theirs, superseded the free train rights. It superseded the food parcels that they were given. So that is why they did not move and resisted. So it is in essence the nature of the resistance the people of this province waged against the white supremacy at the time.
What was then the outcome of this battle? I mean, what has happened to that land since?
What has since happened, Thabo, is that as government in the year 2009, we started constructing a site wherein the congregants would year in, year out go to and look back and narrate the history to the generations that are the current generation. But also we as government, we are in a process of making that center as a tourist destination, because as the province of the Eastern Cape, we have taken a decision to combine heritage together with tourism, so that whoever comes to this province gets an understanding of what the province contributed towards the liberation of this country. We are also in the process of declaring that site as a heritage site, and that process is led by the National Department of Sports, Arts and Culture.
Perhaps one of the most important questions is, what are we learning from this past tragedy?
I think, Thabo, the most basic lesson we can learn is that it is important to know where we come from as a country, so that we can avoid repeating the mistakes or the tragedies that happened in the past. Also, I think it is important that we educate our young children, so that we not only tell the story to the tourists, but also tell the story to the generation, the upcoming generation, our leaders for tomorrow, so that, as I said earlier on, so that we can have a democratic and united South Africa, wherein these massacres and tragedies do not occur in the future.
Yeah. Are there any parallels we can draw from this massacre in Bulhoek and today's service delivery protests in South Africa? And that, it's a similar kind of sentiment where people sometimes would be so defiant of a system that is not delivering to them that we would see them burning clinics, not that there's any justification for it, burning libraries, Are there some similarities that we can draw from this?
A lot of people they tend to lean towards drawing similarities from certain massacres or the massacres and the violent protests that we're experiencing today. There are, to some degree, some similarities, like, for instance, how the South African Police Service handled these violent protests. Because, Thabo, you must remember that we have members that some of them have served in the apartheid government and then were infused into the democratic dispensation. And to some of those members, when they joined the force, they were only introduced to the forceful management of such a crisis or instances. So it is difficult, and we ought as government to deal with the demilitarization of the South African Police Service. However, I want to indicate, Thabo, that people need not to draw a parallel and think that these incidents are similar, because at the time there was no room for negotiation, or there was little room for negotiation. Today's government is giving people an opportunity to engage it we even engage in government through social media these days. There's a whole range of platforms wherein we can engage government, and I want to discourage members of the society who, out of frustration because of a lack of a certain service, then they go and ban an existing infrastructure, because that is taking us back, and government does not have unending money. When you touch an infrastructure that is readily available, you are taking us 10 steps back.
MEC, we appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us. That's the Eastern Cape MEC for Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, Fezeka Nkomonye, giving us, of course, the breakdown of the commemorations taking place there, commemorating the Bulhoek massacre. When we